All right, everybody. Happy hump day. This is the Horn Takes podcast. Your very rough around the edges Texas sports talk destination. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. It is my Friday because we have got an exciting week. Our youngest son graduates. Well, our only son, but our youngest child graduates tomorrow night. And then we've got some playoff baseball over in Graham, Texas. I had to look up where Graham, Texas was. I know it's out this way. I played college football with a kid from Graham when I was at McMurray University in Abilene. So I know that it was out this way. I just never have been there. And it's in the middle of nowhere. So much so that we couldn't find a hotel in Graham. So we'll be staying at Wichita Falls. Should be a good time. We'll talk about this Big 12 tournament that's underway. Day one was yesterday. A pretty heartbreaking loss for Texas, at least for me. I don't know about anybody else. I feel like as a Texas fan base, it did not go over well. And then we'll talk a little SEC. We've been watching the SEC tournament a little bit because that's going to be our new home. Hopefully, next spring we'll be at Hoover, the Met at Hoover, over in Hoover, Alabama. And I'm going to try really, 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 really hard to make it to that if Texas makes it. I think that would be cool. So we'll see how that goes. I was looking at hotels for next year, and hotels for next year during the week that I think this tournament is going to go on are like $800 and something a night. Come on, hotels. Y'all got to be better. And the crazy thing is I'm watching this shit. It's over my right shoulder right now on TV, back behind me, kind of watching Arkansas come back and Carolina blow it. But there's not a lot of fans in the stands, so I don't know. I mean, maybe the night games pick up. I can see that. I don't know. We'll see. But talking about the SEC, headed into the SEC tournament, LSU, a lot of people were thinking they're out of the tournament. A lot of people were thinking Florida had to maybe do some stuff to make the tournament. We'll talk about we'll give our opinion on it. We don't know. We don't know shit around here. We just like to talk about sports, mostly football and baseball, sprinkle in some basketball every once in a while. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. If you just like to listen to podcasts, you can find us at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com or just about anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're registered for the big ones. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart. I don't think I ever could get the Google thing to work, and it just pissed me off, and fuck Google. We're on those other ones. Listen to us there. Tons of momentum for this Texas baseball team headed into the Big 12 tournament. They'd won 15 of their last 21 games over the last 6 weeks of the season. The offense was just really starting to get really hot and really consistent. And I think, obviously, if you can be hot consistently, that's a huge deal in baseball. The pitching kind of seemed to stabilize over the last few weekends. It's not great. It's not terrible either, though. I mean, they're top 25% in the country in team ERA, WHIP, all the measures that you look at. They're not bad. They're just not what Texas fans are used to seeing. So I think there's kind of this narrative that the Texas pitching is bad. And we've talked about it on the show, and we've said that. The Texas pitching is bad. When we talked about that a lot, though, we were talking about early in the season where we were losing some games because of pitching. Like, we were scoring a lot of points, and I keep saying points, y'all. We were scoring a lot of runs, and we just couldn't stop the other team from scoring a lot of runs. So that's obviously a huge problem. But, yeah, so things that kind of look like over the last few weeks, the things were starting to click. Won a series against Oklahoma, won a series against Oklahoma State, win a series on the road at UCF, sweep Kansas at home, have a couple of really big walk-off games in a row for Texas there offensively. So things were looking up as they head into the Big 12 tournament. They had worked their way into some projections as a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. And folks, I could have been way outside of bounds. Probably was. But there was a stretch there in the middle of the season where I said it on the show, like, I don't think if they keep playing like this team's not going to make the tournament. Obviously, they didn't keep playing like that. So, but yeah, so at least for us, they went from not being in the tournament to now they're a 2 seed, and kind of a outside but possible shot at maybe hosting a regional if they could cruise through this Big 12 tournament. And they just absolutely laid an egg offensively against a pretty bad and really struggling Texas Tech team. They lost 6-4. Duplantier gave up a pretty massive 2-run home run in the top of the ninth. And it's just the way it goes, man. When you don't put teams away and you give them opportunities, you can't flirt with that too much. The baseball gods are cruel, and they will bust your ass in the nuts if you don't take care of business. And that's kind of what happened last night. Duplantier shouldn't feel bad at all. I mean, he was awesome up until the top of the ninth inning. He had pitched 3 innings already. He only surrendered 1 hit. He had 6 Ks. He was looking really good. And Duplantier is one of those guys that man, last year he was like a home run machine, and he was kind of the bullpen guy you saw during the midweeks, and it just wasn't working out for him. And this year he's gotten better over the course of the season, and so I really like to see Duplantier perform the way he did last night outside of that home run. And really, that home run, it certainly wasn't a cheap home run. But it was one of those high towering deals. And I think it hit the top of the left field foul pole. One of those type of deals. When it landed, I thought that's foul because it was way, outside, but I guess it hit the top of the foul pole. So a big 2-run shot for Texas Tech to put Texas in a bind, and Texas just couldn't seem to get anything done, in the bottom of the ninth. So that's the way it goes. You cannot, we say it all the time, you can't dick around. When you get an opportunity to close players out or close teams out, you got to do it. And Texas didn't score a run in that game after the third inning. So, yeah, not good there. State of the program, I am somewhere right now in between. This is just one game, guys, and that was like a massive punch in the nuts of all the momentum that Texas had built over the last few weeks, headed into the Big 12 tournament and hopefully into the postseason. I can go anywhere along that scale at any given time, and that's just the fan in me. Honestly, it is just one game, but what we hope as fans is that it wasn't a game that starts a trend where the offense does not perform well and Texas sort of underachieves. So I got a lot of concerns after day one of this Big 12 tournament. They couldn't get to 6, first of all, which is kind of an abomination. Texas Tech giving up 15 runs per game over the last 2 weekends. 15 runs per game over the last 2 weekends, and Texas only manages 4. They gave it up over 12 runs per game over the last 3 weekends. So this is not a Texas Tech pitching staff that's used to holding people to 4 runs. And so I think for them to do that shows a couple things. One, they had a really good night. I mean, stuff like that just doesn't happen. So kudos to those guys for pitching well. And really, pitching well to me just means you know what you can get over and you get it over. And you find your spots. It doesn't have to always be these overpowering things. It doesn't even have to be a lot of strikeouts. Although I'm pretty certain Texas struck out a few times. I know they stranded a lot of guys on the bases. But here's the deal with this Texas team. They got to get to 6. And we talked about that last week. In fact, last week's show was called Get to 6. This Texas team has scored 6 runs 23 times. Scored less than 6 runs 23 times this season. And they lost 17 of those games. They scored 6 or more 33 times this season and won all but 4 of those. So obviously, 6 is kind of this offensive team's magic number. They should have definitely been able to get to 6 against that Texas Tech pitching staff that has just gotten absolutely abused the last 2 to 3 weekends. Another thing that's super concerning to me is they score 3 in the third, and then they turn around and give up 3 immediately in the top of the fourth. And this is one of the things. So like if you're on the it's the pitching is the problem bandwagon for this Texas team. This is one of the places where I'll put a foot on the bandwagon while it goes by. We have been really bad this season. When we strike, we let the other team come back and strike. And that's exactly what happened last night against Texas Tech. 2 outs, 2 quick outs for Boogie in that inning. Gives up a 2-out walk, gives up a single, gives up a home run, 3 runs, right back in the game, tie ball game. When Texas should have gone out. And I'm not saying, I mean, you can't always slam the door shut. But you cannot sit there and watch your offense get you 3 and then turn around and give up 3. That is so deflating for an offense. And I think when there's a tie ball game and you start getting further into the game, the tendency for the hitters is to press a little bit more. Try to be the guy that makes something happen rather than just letting the game come to them and just relying on their skills. So that was a huge concern for me last night. The other big concern was the top third of the order hit 182 last night. 2 hits, 1 home run, 1 RBI. And that just ain't going to get it done. JT, Flores, those guys got to be better. They got to be more consistent. Those are the guys with the big batting averages. Those are the guys that are at the top of the order. They just got to be better. And again, my worry is we've seen them disappear in chunks earlier this season, earlier in the season. And my concern is we're going to get back in that cycle. And this is the absolute worst time to be in that type of cycle if you're the top 3 guys in the lineup. And then I think ultimately they just could not beat a team that hasn't won a Big 12 game since April 21st. Over a month it's been since Texas Tech has won a Big 12 baseball game. Now, granted, one of those games got rained out. So 3 series, they got swept in the games they played. Not a good look. Again, though, we got to stay inside the scale of punch to the nuts. The season's over, and it's just one game. The truth's probably somewhere in the middle. We'll see ultimately how it turns out. I think another thing, when you look at the sort of the state of the program right now, is it looks like Pierce is kind of back on this whole Porter Brown, Jack O'Dowd thing. Porter Brown's batting .211, Jack O'Dowd .217. Those guys have had some off the bench type hits this year that have been kind of big. O'Dowd was really big last night. He went 3 for 3, hit a home run. But Brown was an offer, and Brown has been struggling all season long at the plate. It's not like these guys are a 211, 217 where they were kicking ass and then just went on like the world's biggest slump. These guys have been in a slump all freaking season long. And for a while there, we saw Casey Borba at first. We saw D. Kennedy at second. We saw JT go out to center field. And that was kind of how he handled those positions and handled the lineup. And Jack O'Dowd was out. Porter Brown was out. And I thought things were better under Borba and Kennedy. Those guys are the future. They're not hitting much better than Porter Brown or Jack O'Dowd are right now. I mean, they are hitting better, but it's not like markedly better. But I think the other thing when you're looking at who's going to be in the lineup is who are the better defenders. And I absolutely think that Casey Borba and D. Kennedy are better with the glove than Porter. But Porter Brown to me just seems like he might have been an infielder at one point that said when he got to TCU, they were just like, you got to play outfield. Hey, you're fast. We got to get you in the lineup because you can hit. Back in the day when he could hit. And so he just doesn't look comfortable out there a lot of the time. So Casey Borba is a legit outfielder. But so you look at the game, those are some of the things that just kind of rub me the wrong way as I'm staying up till, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the morning. I feel like it was that late, maybe 12:15 or something. I don't think they got started till 9:30, so it could have been 1 o'clock in the morning when that one ended. And so those are just the things to me that just are really frustrating. You go into that game as the Texas Longhorns, especially as the fan base, and you really expect to win that game, especially when you look at all the stuff that's going on with Texas Tech and just how abysmal their last few weeks of the season have been. They got run ruled in 7 innings by Arizona State, 21-6, just last weekend, and we could only manage 4 freaking runs. Momentum's a funny thing, though. It can go as quickly as it comes. And if you're Texas, you absolutely have to fight, scratch, claw, punch motherfuckers in the nuts, poke people in the eyes. You cannot let that slip away today against Cincinnati. The thing about momentum is not only can it change, but when it changes, it usually rolls hard the other direction. So this is kind of, to me, this game against Cincinnati today seems like kind of maybe one of those pivotal moments in the season where, do we see Texas come out and struggle and drop another one and go 2-barbecue in the Big 12 championship tournament? Or do we see them get back in it and manage to show some fight and try to, make a little run here in the tournament? We've seen them fight pretty hard this year. We've seen them where things just look like, man, this is it. Texas is fucked this year. We've seen this team go to bat, swing the sticks, keep making pitches. We've seen it. It hasn't been pretty. And it's been pretty damn frustrating, I'll tell you that. But they've managed to get themselves in a pretty decent position from a postseason perspective. There's a lot of teams out there right now that are capable of making a run in Omaha, making a run in Omaha. I think Texas is one of those teams, but they absolutely have to get it done today at 4:30 to kind of avoid the completion of this momentum shift. It's happened a lot, and we'll talk about some of that in a minute, but I mean, just because you lose in your conference tournament does not mean you can't go on and do great things in postseason. It's not like football. It's just a different sport. But I think at all costs you want to avoid that momentum change at this point in the season. Like, if you can go and make a little run in the Big 12 tournament, that's ideally what you want to go do. The other question, I think, and I threw it out on a message board today, and I don't know, but it popped in my head, could going 2 and done at this Big 12 baseball tournament, could that drop Texas down to a 3 seed, or would they just lose ground amongst the 2 seeds and end up in a regional that's just ultra tough? I don't know the answer. I think there's some points probably both way. People have not been impressed. The guys that rank baseball have not been impressed with Texas most of the season. They just now started they were ranked in most of the polls at the beginning. Had a shitty weekend down in Houston, and that pretty much put them out of the polls, and they didn't return till just a few weeks ago. So I don't think a lot of people, and I feel like they just put them there because they kind of had to. It's Texas. They'd beaten Oklahoma in a series. They'd beaten Oklahoma State in a series. They've only lost one Big 12 series, and I still can't believe they dropped a series to BYU in baseball in Austin. That's just that was back in the dark times of the 2024 season. So anyway, people haven't really been that impressed with them, so I could see it where they just go, especially if they're not even competitive today. I could see them possibly getting dropped down to a 3 seed, but I think what's going to save them and keep them as a 2, and I'm not 100% sure that in a regional it really matters what seed you are. I get it. Like, 2 plays 3, 1 plays 4. Obviously, if you're 1, you'd rather play 4. You'd rather play a lower seed. I understand all of that. But ultimately, going to a regional and being successful in a regional, to me, is a lot about winning game 1. And I think there's not a team in the country that Texas couldn't go win game 1 against. They just got to play good baseball. So, I don't know. We'll see how all that turns out. But I think that Oklahoma State series and that OU series are going to keep them as a 2. I think if, especially now that they're in the losers bracket, they could manage to run deep into the Big 12 tournament and somehow pull that one off. I think I saw today they have 5 games to win in a row if they're going to do that. And they'd have to win 2 in the championship round, championship game day, to pull that off. So no small feat, especially when you're talking about a team that's kind of short on arms, especially short on quality arms. But it's not impossible. And I think if they did it, they might be in a situation where they might host a regional. I think a team, a program like Texas is going to get, ultimately at the end when it's all said and done, they're going to get that kind of stuff because TV money and, ticket revenue, all that kind of stuff, that stuff matters. It keeps the business of college baseball going. And so, like it or not, the big brands they're going to kind of get the benefit of the doubt when it's all said and done. So we'll see if they can figure out a way to play themselves into that situation and figure out a way not to get embarrassed today. They really need to come out and have a good game, get a good solid win against Cincinnati. SEC tournament, man, how wild is this tournament? There are so many good teams there. It's almost like the de facto College World Series in a way. There's a pretty damn good chance that the College World Series champ is playing in Hoover, Alabama this week. They've won 6 of the last 10 College World Series that have actually gone on. We had the COVID year where they canceled the season early on. And the SEC has won 4 straight College World Series championships. So a lot of good baseball in that conference. And it's just been wild so far. LSU pounced on Georgia and knocked them out. South Carolina upsets Alabama to keep their hopes alive. They're in a battle right now with Arkansas. Last I saw it was 4-4, and I haven't turned to look and see what the score is. Vandy outlasts Florida, a team last night that a lot of people really kind of been saying, Florida's got to win at least one game in the SEC tournament, or we just can't see them being in the NCAA tournament. Mississippi State edges Ole Miss in a really close 2-1 game. Rematch of the Iron Egg Bowl or whatever the fuck it is. The Egg Bowl. I don't even know if they call the baseball matchup the Egg Bowl. But just to kind of illustrate how, we were talking earlier about teams get knocked out of this tournament all the time early that go on really nice runs in the College World Series. 2022 is a perfect example. Ole Miss was done on day 1 of the SEC tournament, and they go on, win the College World Series. So there are a lot of good teams, a lot of capable teams in this SEC tournament. It'll be interesting to see who wins this whole deal, and who the surprise SEC team is, because there almost always is one that pops up, somehow figures out a way to get to Omaha and makes a shit ton of noise in Omaha. So we'll have to see which one that is today. But talking about Florida and LSU, it is almost crazy to me. And we said that, and I admittedly, I don't know about all the ins and outs of how these groups rank these teams and how the committee looks at teams. I'm not even going to begin to pretend that I understand that whatsoever. But it seems absolutely insane to me that an LSU team with the record that they had coming into this tournament, even before they played a single game in this tournament, was kind of on the outside looking in. I mean, people are saying they got to win a game or they're not getting in. I'm like, that makes no sense. I know that their record in the SEC is not that great, but it's the freaking SEC. There is multiple teams in that conference that could go win the whole College World Series. And I think, last year we talked a lot about LSU versus the field, and I chose the field just from a numbers game. SEC versus the field, I'm going to pick the SEC every time over the field. And I'll lose some, but over a lifespan, Over the last 10 years, you would have come out on top doing that. And you'd have had a real happy last 4 years. So, again, how in the hell did the two teams, the two programs that were in the College World Series final last year come into the SEC tournament, and we're talking about how they may not make it to the NCAA tournament? They're not. So those two teams are not two of the 64 best teams in the country. Seems like a long shot to me. If either one of those teams gets left at home, man, that's a rough deal. LSU obviously gets that big win against Georgia. They run rule Kentucky today. I guess Kentucky's the 1 seed in the SEC. It doesn't matter. Actually, they're not the 1 seed in the SEC tournament, but they're projected to be the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. So again, how are we establishing all this stuff? Doesn't matter. I thought they probably did enough by beating Georgia. Stroking Kentucky earlier this morning, the way they did 11-0, is absolutely, they're in the tournament. You will see LSU baseball in the NCAA tournament this year. But did Florida lose all hope with that round 1 loss to Vandy? Man, I don't know. To me, this is kind of like one of those deals where I think you could look at it and say, yeah, they're probably done, but I just don't see how you do it. I don't see how you take a team out of the SEC they're the number 1 strength of schedule in the country. They've got a really high RPI. Yeah, they've struggled, but if you look at their record and against high RPI teams, and you look at the records of some of the other sort of bubble teams, the teams they would be competing against to make that final spot, I just don't see any way in hell you leave Florida out. And I don't know how you wake up the next day thinking Florida is not one of the 64 best teams in the country, because it's just absolute absurdity. And I guess that's probably not the criteria. You got to actually have some numbers to back those things up to get into the tournament. But anyway, this is all, to me, a lot of foreshadowing for next season. Everybody talks about the football in the SEC and how great that's going to be, and I think it is going to be outstanding. The baseball in the SEC, bringing on Oklahoma, who was the team that lost to that Ole Miss team a couple years ago in the College World Series final, and bringing on Texas, who's just been an absolute staple in the College World Series since its inception. Man, baseball is going to be legit in the SEC next season. We're excited to watch that. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with all this stuff. Hopefully Texas gets their shit together, wins a game this afternoon, and can figure out a way to win a couple more, make a little deep run. We'll be back tomorrow with day 2 reactions of the Big 12 tournament. And it's mostly just going to be about this Texas game coming up in 45 minutes. Check that out. You can email me at horntegspodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good one. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Get hooked.